Hello, this is Gloria Heck, and welcome to the monthly market report for February 2022. I'm going to be walking you through the three most important topics in housing right now, so hang on. We'll be talking about home ownership as a hedge against inflation, rising mortgage rates, and the latest update on what we have with forbearance. So I'm going to begin with the first topic, which is home ownership as a hedge against inflation. I've spoke about this before, but it's important for us to be talking about it. As you know, we keep seeing prices rise around us at the gas pump, at the grocery store. Home ownership is not immune to that in any way, and neither is rising rents. We're going to talk about that as well. But one of the things we want to focus on is how locking someone's fixed monthly cost, their biggest cost that they have in home ownership at today's price, is so beneficial to safeguarding someone or hedging against inflation and those rising costs all around us as we go forward. I want to begin with the quote first from, here we go, Investopedia. It says, real estate is one of the time-honored inflation hedges. It's a tangible asset, and those tend to hold their value when inflation reigns, unlike paper assets. More specifically, as prices rise, so do property values. So, what we can see here is that home ownership is one of those things that you can lock in the cost today. It's an asset that's increasing in value in time, and as prices rise and home values rise and all the prices around us rise, locking in that fixed cost in home ownership is really game changing and is truly a hedge against tomorrow's inflation. What I want to do in this next slide is show you a visual that really depicts what I'm talking about with home ownership outperforming over time. So let's take a look at this slide. This is home ownership as a hedge against inflation, and I want to break it down for you so you can really see what I'm talking about. This is home appreciation versus the consumer price increases over the decades, and it goes all the way back to 1970s. Now, what you're looking at here is the blue bars, which is the average inflation rate for the decade, and the green bars are the average price appreciation for each of those decades as well. So let's look at the 1970s to start. Inflation increased at 7.1% in that decade, and home prices appreciated at 9.9% in the same period. So home ownership outperformed inflation. And where do you want to be in inflationary times? In that asset that's outperforming inflation. Now, in the 1980s, it was a little bit more balanced. 5.6% inflation, 5.5% home appreciation. And look at the 90s. We start to see home values tick up against a little bit more, outperforming inflation throughout that decade. Over time, what you can see is that home ownership is generally looked at as this great hedge against inflation because home values are outperforming better than the inflation rate. This means that someone buying a home today can lock in today's cost and protect themselves against the rising cost of inflation in that biggest monthly payment going forward. Now, this becomes really important when we start to talk about renting. Because renting takes on the risk of rising rental prices year after year after year. I've shown you that data in the past. If you've been following along with how rental prices are truly skyrocketing. So let me share a quote from Here's Really Powerful Renters. This is from Bankrate, and it says, a fixed rate mortgage allows you to maintain the biggest portion of housing expenses at the same payment. Sure, property taxes will rise and other expenses may creep up, but your monthly housing payment remains the same. That's certainly not the case if you're renting, and that's because rental prices rise year after year, and so this becomes really powerful for someone who may be sitting on the fence thinking, I could buy today. I could press pause and see what's going on in the market. I could wait and see what happens to home values, if they drop, if they rise. Well, guess what? All the forecasts show that home values are projected to continue rising. Mortgage rates are also projected to keep rising, and we know that rental prices are rising. So what does that mean at the end of the day? Someone who continues to rent but could buy is taking the additional increases in rent year after year. Plus, it's going to cost them more money to buy a home down the road. So really, what's important for renters to understand is this dynamic, and I think this next visual really helps show how rental prices compare to the inflation rate. This shows that rent increase has been greater than inflation in most years. So let me break it down. Rental price appreciation versus core inflation rate. Again, going all the way back to the 70s. So your blue line is that core inflation rate, and your green line is the rental price appreciation. And what do you see on the whole? The green line is higher than the blue line in most scenarios, meaning that rental prices have increased at a faster rate than inflation in most times. Yes, there's some ticks down below that blue line. However, that means it's more expensive to rent over time because rental prices are continuing to rise faster than the rate of inflation. So when I have a conversation with renters, it becomes mission critical that they understand the dynamic of buying now, if they can, to avoid those increasing costs for rents and inflation all around us. So let me go ahead and share this quote. I think this really kind of brings it home for us. It says, this is from Forbes, homeowners are shielded from mounting rental prices because their cost is fixed, regardless of what's happening in the market. They're locking in that payment at today's cost. Tangible assets like real estate get more valuable over time. You've seen that in the graphs and the data that I've shown you, which makes buying a home a good way to spend your money during inflationary times. Let's talk a little bit about mortgage rates. Here we are in February. We've seen a rise in mortgage rates in a volatile environment. So I'm going to cover where we're at today, but certainly as we go through the months, I'm going to keep you updated on what's happening with mortgage rates. So let's start right here. I think a positive jobs report hints to the Fed taking action and raising the Fed funds rate in March. Expect to see rates go up. So we look at this rise in rates. We're at about 3.55%. This graph goes back to the beginning of 2020, and we're starting to get back in the area of where we started when the pandemic came on us in March of 2020. Just to put that in perspective, the Fed comes in and acts the influence. They don't control mortgage rates, but they do influence the rates down, and now we're coming back up. A sign that we can hope for all that the economy is improving, that we're getting through this and we're moving ahead. If you take a little bit larger look and go back to the beginning of 2018, which is what this graphic shows on the average 30-year fixed, and sort of make this line of 3.55%, you can see where we sit there, right? We're higher back in 2018, and 2019 started to come down and certainly dropped to historic lows during the pandemic, and we're starting to come back out of that. Perspective on that again from Freddie Mac. Here's what Freddie Mac has to say about this. As mortgage rates rise, we do expect some moderation in housing demand, causing house price growth to temper. However, the combination of a large number of entry-level home buyers facing a shortage of entry-level inventory of homes for sale should keep the market competitive. That's what they have to say. No doubt, we're seeing a housing market that is competitive this year. If you take this 3.55% interest rate and even going into 4%, which I think we may see very soon, there's still a very, very favorable rate when you go back to the 70s and 80s when interest rates were way higher. Now, to the next topic. The last one I'm going to walk through today is your latest update on forbearance. This is something that I have been following for a while, and sharing today's data is going to help show why we will not see a wave of foreclosures coming to the market. Now, I want to begin with an update on how many loans are in the forbearance program. Take a look at this graph right now. Loans in forbearance have fallen below 1 million. This is massive. We're roughly at 780,000 loans in forbearance today, and that equates to only about 1.4% of all mortgages. If you think about it, where we started, there in the red bars on the left, there were nearly 5 million homes in the forbearance plan in May of 2020, and we're down to about 780,000. So huge progress, and just one more way that shows that the forbearance program has really helped homeowners change their situation. They're able to stay in their home. They're really in a better place than they would have been in such a time of economic uncertainty. And this is vastly different than what we saw in 2008. So I want to share a quote from Black Knight that says, as the COVID-19 pandemic continues to create uncertainty in the global economic, the overwhelming majority, 89% of single-family homeowners who sought financial assistance through COVID-related mortgage payment forbearance plans have exited those plans. So many people, 89% of those people who went into forbearance plans have exited, and this is huge. It's a massive improvement. What I want to share today is this graph. This is loans exiting the forbearance program. I want to break this down because this really walks you through what's happening as people are exiting the program today. So take a look at the green section. Let's start here. 38.1% of the homeowners exiting the forbearance plan are paid in full. So they've made their monthly payments or they've paid off their loan. They've done something to bring their payments current, and they're in a great place. They're walking away, no issue. Now 43.7% are workouts or repayment plans. That's the section in blue. This is a game-changing section. This is the section we didn't have the last time around when the housing bubble burst, because these are the homeowners who were able to make a modification, a loan deferral, to get back to their bank and work with their bank or their lender to change their situation and stay in their homes. This is huge. And what you see in this blue section is getting a little bit bigger than the green section, and that's because more and more people have been able to go back and work out an alternative plan. Now, the percentage of homeowners that are still in trouble are in the orange section, 18.2%. But what this does mean is that those homeowners are exiting the plan without a loss mitigation plan. But on the safe side, what we know from Black Knight is that 93% of the homeowners in the forbearance plan have at least 10% equity. So when you have that kind of equity, you also have the opportunity to potentially sell your home rather than go into forbearance. 10% is kind of that tipping point of people who could sell their house, pay off their fees, and maybe even walk away with a little cash in their pocket if they sell their home. This gives someone a different opportunity than going into forbearance. We have a very strong equity situation across the country right now, enabling that opportunity, which is great. So as we look at this graph and we think about how many homeowners are exiting the plan, what's happening? Well, the reality is that about 4 out of 5 homeowners are walking away just fine. Now, where I want to bring some additional contact to this is what the foreclosure situation looks like in a typical year in the U.S., because I think this is really going to start to shape up what we're talking about today versus what we had in 2008, when 9.3 million homes went into foreclosure the last time around when the housing bubble burst. We're in a really different situation now. So remember that. 9.3 million. As I walk you through this next slide. What this says here is that 422,360 fewer foreclosures over the last year. So we have significantly fewer foreclosures today than we would even in a normal year. Let me break it down to you. So look at those first three red bars, the taller ones on the left. That's 2017, 2018, and 2019. The number of foreclosures we had in those normal years leading up to the pandemic averaged just under 300,000. And so the unfortunate reality is that in this country, every year there are homeowners who do go into the foreclosure process. You know, they have a job loss or a challenging financial situation. Something happens where homeowners have to give their homes back to their bank or their lender. In 2017 through 2019, that number averaged out to about 290,000. Now, if you look at 2020 and 2021, these were not normal years. This is where the forbearance program came into play, and there were far fewer foreclosures in each of those years. So if you look at the red bar under 2020, there were 120,000 foreclosures in 2020. That was short 161,000 of what would be normal. 2021 through the third quarter is what we have data for right now. 29,000, so massively short of what is normal. That's where that 422,360 number comes from. And contextually, if you think about that, that is incredibly low. In fact, it is so low, I think this next graph really shows it well. Foreclosure activity is actually at its all-time low. So look at the number over on the right side of the screen, 2021. Where we are so far, there are 151,000 foreclosure filings. Now, we never want any one homeowner to go through the foreclosure process. We certainly don't want that to happen. We believe in homeownership and the value that brings everyone. But if you put this into context and you look at those red bars, 2007 to 2015, millions of homeowners were going into the foreclosure process, and that is vastly different from where we are today. I mean, even in this number of 151,000, if it doubles, if it triples, if it quadruples, if it keeps going, we're nowhere near when the housing bubble bursts. And this is impactful, showing that the fundamentals of today's market are just very, very different today. Now, I want to end with this quote because I think it really kind of brings it all home. This is from CoreLogic, and it says, we may see a little bit of an uptick in foreclosure rates in 2022. Just an uptick, though, from an extraordinarily low level. We're not expecting to see a big increase. We expect delinquency rates overall on home mortgages to actually continue to remain quite low, end quote. That's exactly where we are today. You know, the number of homes going to the foreclosure process, nothing like we saw in the housing crisis. Thanks to the forbearance program, they gave homeowners the mortgage relief that they needed when they needed it most. So I'm going to end right here. Thank you so much for joining me for the monthly market report. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss anything.